Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Story, where we discuss what Canada is, what Canada could be, and what Canada should be.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Canadian Story. Thank you so much for being here. Today, we are joined by the ever so lovely Cait Mizzi. Cait, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
It's our sincere pleasure. If you guys don't know, Cait is here on her second interview. We just can't get enough. So for the people who didn't listen to your first episode, why don't you just go through kind of your background and who you are so that we can give some context to the conversation we're going to have?
Of course. So as Zach mentioned, my name is Cait Mizzi. I'm a registered nutritionist and I have a background in functional medicine and sports nutrition, amongst some other things, an ever-growing sort of list that keeps expanding, and I love that. I'm a big education junkie, but I have a clinical practice, a one-on-one private practice, and that has changed greatly over the course of the last couple of years. I used to be in a bricks and mortar space, and now the business is completely virtual. And I am a general practitioner, so I help people with all kinds of different things, and I work with all ages and genders. So right from, pediatrics, like kids and babies, postnatal and prenatal care, and then through the spectrum of life, right into geriatrics. So I work with all kinds of different people for all kinds of different reasons.
Amazing. So the reason I wanted to have you on today, on this podcast, we have talked lots about COVID. We are not here today to talk about COVID. But I think what COVID has done over the past, we're coming up on, I guess we're 2.5, coming up on 3 years now. At least I've noticed in the circle that I surround myself with, it's changed a lot of people's perception of health. And you have made, kind of what you do, like your life and your career about thinking about health. So I wanted to have you on for the general person. I'm having trouble framing this question because everyone is different and health is so individualized. But let's just start with, if you want to make your life better and you want to do it through the framework of improving your health, what's a great place to start?
Well, I'm glad that you framed that question with the caveat that health is so individualized, because it is for sure going to be really different for everyone, especially, considering age, considering environment, considering lifestyle. All of those things definitely will have, varying influence over one's health. And so they all kind of need to be taken into consideration. But like you said, for the sort of general average person, there is plenty that we can do, especially in the Western world and, especially within Canada and the United States, I would say predominantly, the vast majority of us are not living in a way that is at all conducive to our evolution, to our biology. And so there is really like a never-ending list of opportunities for people to take advantage of in order to improve their well-being. And that's actually a great thing, because it means that you can really start super small, and there are plenty of different options to choose from that will yield even either small change or large change, and improve your life in accordance with those changes. So, nutrition obviously is my, I guess, like the mainstay of my training and the mainstay of my approach. I work with nutrition first with a lot of my clients. And so, a general cleanup of the diet can be really beneficial. And that doesn't mean that anyone has to follow a particular diet. I think there are a lot of people that get really caught up in sort of like the noise of what's out there, like, jumping onto the keto wagon or vegan wagon or gluten-free wagon. There's sort of all of these possibilities for diet. And I don't think that is where anyone needs to necessarily go first. I think the best way to just have a general improvement in one's diet is to do palatable or ultra processed accounts for the predominant portion of our calories day to day. So sort of weeding out some of those ultra processed foods. So taking into consideration more whole foods, which means just, whole fruits, whole vegetables, whole pieces of meat, things that aren't made in a factory for you, but even consuming some of those foods at home would still be fine if you were making them yourself from what's going into your food. And that also enables you to limit things like, trans fats, polyunsaturated fats, like industrial seed oils, sugar, additives, MSG, preservatives, coloring, flavoring, and that list goes on and on. So the best way, just to sort of simplify, is eat more whole foods, eat less processed foods, and you are already well on your way to a much, much better place as far as your wellness is concerned.
Okay, great. Why don't we define whole foods? Because I think people understand what processed foods are, but what exactly is a whole food, just in case we're a little unclear there?
I think this is a really great question. And I actually, in my practice, I have a whole document that goes out to every patient that really elaborates on that concept and fleshes out the whole spectrum of stages between a whole food and then an ultra processed food, because it is a huge spectrum and all food requires some level of processing. For example, you go into your garden and you pick a carrot out of the ground, that in its most pure form is a whole food. The second you wash it, chop it, take the stem off, peel it, that's processing, but it's not processing in a way that is harmful to us. That's just sort of cleaning up the food, ensuring that there's no contamination of, other things that we don't want on the food, taking off the bits and pieces that might not be so delicious, depending on who you ask. And so that level of processing is totally reasonable. And even you can move that along the spectrum a little bit further too. Let's take an egg, for example. We're going to take an egg from the nest of a chicken. We're going to boil it so that it can be hard boiled and cooked. And then we're going to peel it. And then we're going to mash that into egg salad. And then we're going to make bread and put it on bread. There you go. That's like a few more steps down the road in processing. Again, you're still sort of dealing with whole ingredients. You haven't added anything that's man-made, not man-made, industrially made. So manipulated either by lab-made ingredients or, very shelf-stable ingredients like excess salt or other flavor enhancers or stabilizing agents, anti-mold agents, caking agents, all of these things that a lot of processed foods have added into them. If you're just still making an egg salad sandwich, but you're making it from the whole ingredients that you have at home, you are processing your food, but you're processing it in a way that it enables all of the nutrients to remain very stable. It remains fresh, and it doesn't have all of the potentially harmful ingredients or inflammatory ingredients that are added in along the way in order to really just make something last longer and create a higher profit margin so that it doesn't spoil. And really, that's the only reason why processing of foods exists, is simply just to allow for a product to exist for a longer span of time without going bad. And so that company can make more money off of the bottom line so that they're not wasting ingredients and wasting food. And that's a great thing for a lot of people. That is important because there are many people in many different areas of the world that don't have immediate access to all of the foods that we do here in Canada have a lot of privilege to have easy access to. But even saying that, there are plenty of people in Canada that don't have great access to a lot of foods. So, those those sort of like ingredients that are preserved for a longer shelf life do serve a purpose. And I'm not saying that they're all bad, but I'm just saying generally day to day, we want to try to minimize those ingredients as much as possible because they're not food. They are manipulated ingredients in order to extend the life of a product. And our bodies don't really need those things inside of them. So yeah, you can kind of carry that whole concept right through to the end of the highly processed, refined spectrum into a food like, let's think like a plant-based butter, for example. Like that is probably like the pinnacle of industrial, highly processed, refined food. Is we're taking like a slurry of different oils, and those are highly processed in and of themselves. And then we're combining them, adding potentially coloring agents, flavoring agents, preservatives, deodorizers, bleaching agents, all sorts of things, stabilizers, emulsifiers, and then creating this product that could just be butter that's made from one, maybe two ingredients if you're salting your butter. So you sort of see how that starts to lend itself to this very wide spectrum of, foods from their whole form. So a carrot out of the ground, an egg, a nut, a tomato, a piece of fish, to, a chicken McNugget or Earth Balance plant-based butter spread or a can of Coke.
Right. So there's another factor to this whole conversation too, which is kind of the way that if you start paying attention, you realize the way food is presented at the grocery store isn't necessarily indicative of the actual health benefits you might derive from that food. So for the individual who can't go outside and pull a carrot from their garden, how would you approach going to the grocery store, and what would you be looking for as maybe red flags when you're looking at ingredients lists?
Yeah, so I think that there have been a lot of people, even in the mainstream, that have approached this conversation and handled it really well. And I would really agree with them for the most part. So sticking to sort of the perimeter of your grocery store is a really good idea. Most of the things you're going to find down all of the different aisles are really not going to be beneficial to you in any way. The argument that salt is on an aisle and things like that, staples that are fine to include in moderation, but predominantly you want to be shopping the perimeter. So that's going to be like your produce aisles. So where all of the whole fresh fruits and vegetables are. There's obviously a spectrum of what some people might consider to be, optimal produce, whether you're interested in organic foods or genetically modified foods, or just regularly conventionally grown foods, whether you care about sourcing those foods locally, or if you don't mind that they come from other countries, that's all sort of another argument altogether. But at the baseline, if you're sort of focusing your energy and your shopping experience on the perimeter of the grocery store, you're probably going to be just fine. That's also where you'll find the deli section. So, like fresh meats or frozen meats, frozen fruits and vegetables are also really great. There's nothing wrong with buying frozen foods. In fact, fresh, frozen, whole foods sometimes are even more nutritious than what you'll find in the produce aisles, because a lot of those fruits and vegetables are frozen at the time of harvest, and so they retain more nutrients that way. But once you start to move down into like the cereal aisle or the snack aisle, crackers, cookies, pastas, sauces, things like that, you are inevitably moving into the terrain of highly processed and refined foods. And of course, again, just like with everything, those exist on a spectrum. You can definitely buy a tomato sauce that contains nice, clean, wholesome ingredients. And you can also buy a tomato sauce that is full of unnecessary additives that don't lend themselves to a healthy life down, over time. So, looking at a product, if you are a tin or a jar, looking at those ingredients and making sure that you know what they are. That's sort of the easiest way to handle it, is if you look at the ingredients list and you can actually understand where every single one of those ingredients originates from, you can think, okay, olive oil, olives ground pressed into an oil. Got it. But if you see, red dye 576, can you logically walk yourself through the processing of how that happened? Probably not, unless you're a food scientist, in which case you're probably even less likely to want to consume it. And that's sort of the easiest way to kind of deal with that problem is like, if there's an ingredient on the list that you don't understand the origin of, I would just leave it on the shelf and opt for something that has ingredients that are as short as possible and as easy to understand as possible. And that is not difficult to do. Any grocery store here in Canada, including sort of like you're talking like your basics, No Frills, Walmart, that sort of thing, Costco. I think most communities have some level of access to, one of those types of grocery stores, Foodland, depending on if you're in Northern Canada, et cetera. They're all going to have this spectrum of foods, and you can definitely get good, clean products in all of those markets.
Amazing. What about supplementation? Is that something that you do for yourself, or are you aiming to get all of your necessary nutrients and vitamins from your food?
Yeah. So again, that's sort of a subject that depends on the individual. So for me, I do not supplement with anything unless I'm sick and require something that's like more acute, like a specific higher dose of something during a very particular time. But for the most part, I do not supplement personally, and I do my very best to ensure that most of my patients do not require supplementation. As long as you have access to good food and you have the ability to feed yourself well, then supplementation, in my opinion, is not necessary. We can get everything we need from a really good, well thought out diet. But there are always exceptions to that. Sometimes, for example, certain neurological issues may present difficulty with, texture or taste for some people. And so food aversions are really real. And if we can't get a specific nutrient because, an entire food group is unlikely to be consumed, then yeah, sometimes supplementation is necessary. I don't love using synthetic nutrients in place of the real whole versions of those that exist in nature, because a lot of those nutrients exist in specific ratios in food. They're also more like complexes or even compounds, if you will. For example, vitamin C is one of those things. So like, yes, you can take a vitamin C supplement. It'll likely be, ascorbic acid or citric acid based. Maybe some other versions of that exist as well. But in nature, you're getting a vitamin C complex in the foods that you're eating. So it might coexist with, enzymes and fiber and certain fruit sugars and all sorts of other things that are imprinted in that food that are far above and beyond just isolated vitamin C. And vitamin C works really well in conjunction with those other things. So when we take it in an isolated form, we're not getting the full benefit of that nutrient in conjunction with all of its other friends in that full whole food form, if you will.
Right. So when you approach your own eating, are you approaching it through the context of how much vitamin D, how much vitamin C am I getting? Maybe you're feeling a little sick. Do you eat certain foods to try to avoid supplementation if you're feeling sick, or do you start with supplementation? Like, is the nutrients and the vitamins something that you are consciously thinking about when you select your foods?
Yes, definitely. And I also understand that that is not going to be the case for the average person. Obviously, they have, a fairly exceptional amount of education in this realm. And so I don't at all assume that the average person would be thinking about food in the same way as me. I wouldn't even pretend that that's going on. And nor do I think it's necessary that someone would be hyper analyzing their food in that way. I don't think that that's even necessary or healthy for the average person. But thinking about it in broad ways is a good thing, because I think that we should at least have some baseline knowledge on, what our food does include and what it's giving to us. And so I do recommend for some individuals, based on history and things like that, that they track their food, and not for the purpose of weight loss, not to count calories or anything else like that. But sometimes even just tracking food on an app like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal, or there's many other versions of that exist that actually calculate the micronutrients of your food. So they help you to understand like how much vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, calcium, magnesium, etc., selenium are you actually getting in a day? And it's pretty eye-opening for a lot of people when they start to do that, because they might perceive their diet to be quite healthy, and in some measures it could be healthy. However, they could be really coming up short on a lot of some really critical nutrients. And so I do like taking people through that exercise of tracking food in order to understand the salad that you're eating every single day for lunch, if you're a creature of habit, or, what's the difference if you eat 2 eggs versus 4 eggs, as far as how much choline or vitamin E or omega-3s are you getting? So there's a lot of really functional information that can be gained and applied through just simple tracking for a couple of weeks in order to gain knowledge on, what that looks like as far as your specific diet is concerned. And then you also asked about, what if I'm sick, or if someone's sick, do you focus on different foods, or do you, bring in the help of a supplement? I think both can be applied. If you are more aware of the foods that you are consuming and what their nutrient profiles look like, then you can definitely double down on some specific foods. Vitamin A is I would say retinol vitamin A, not beta carotene. Beta carotene is a precursor. It doesn't always converts very small, or maybe not at all for some people, into retinol A, which is one issue that a lot of vegans get themselves into. There's also like a really common genetic variant that disables that conversion entirely. So that would be one thing I'd really want to focus in on for certain individuals. But retinol vitamin A is critical for immune function, also for skin health and eye health and development in utero. So there's a lot of applications for vitamin A, and you can get that really easily from animal foods. So organ meats especially, or eggs, egg yolks, and other things. There are lots of things that can contain retinol A, but liver is an ideal, place to get that. And so, if I was getting sick, or if someone was getting sick and or they were surrounded by sick people and really wanted to make sure that they were, quite well prepped in order to either avoid getting sick or have that illness be as least disruptive as it could be, then I would obviously recommend, focusing on foods that are rich sources of vitamin A, selenium, B vitamins, copper and iron in balance, magnesium, protein. All the amino acids are critical. So I guess, that would probably be another really important part of the conversation, is whether you're sick or not sick. If you think you're going to get sick or not, doesn't matter. Protein should always be the star of the show, the main target of your diet, because literally every process that our body does requires amino acids in adequate supply to do what they need to do. And I would say that even though it appears that here in the Western world we have more than enough protein to choose from, it is a fact that actually the majority of people are under consuming protein. And that doesn't mean that's like an invitation to go hit a drive-through and get a couple of cheeseburgers and some chicken nuggets. That's not the kind of protein I'm talking about, but clean, whole food, minimally processed proteins. Obviously, again, on a spectrum, you can get good quality animal products and lesser quality animal products. And so, you do the best you can with what you have, but protein is definitely king in this situation.
Yeah, right. So you know this, but the listeners don't. You are currently coaching my wife. She's doing the one-on-one stuff with you.
Mhm.
And I have been benefiting from that greatly as well because I live in the
Good.
same house as her and I get to learn all the things as well. And for someone who deeply adores protein, I love eating meat, I love eating foods like that, I was shocked by how much protein you need to eat to get the
Yes.
right amount. So why don't we talk about that?
Sure.
What are the benchmarks that you're shooting for, and what's a good way to go about getting enough protein in your day?
Yeah. So again, there is definitely a range. It's not a one size fits all approach. But the, again, average person should be looking to consume, to prevent deficiency, 0.8 kilograms per, sorry, I would correct myself there, 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. That is the absolute basement level. That's simply to prevent deficiency. That's what the RDA is. The RDA is based on really old science, and this science that was applied to come up with those numbers was simply the science that found the appropriate amount to prevent deficiency. So like scurvy, applied to vitamin C, other things like that. This is not in order to thrive, live optimally, have proper body composition, put on muscle, especially if you're active and busy, if you're procreating, there are all these other, phases of life that change that. But 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is the absolute bare minimum that someone should be getting. And again, you're not going to feel great on that. That's just simply going to be to keep you living, to keep you moving forward. If you want to have a baby, if you want to have a healthy metabolism, if you're looking to lose weight, if you're looking to put on any kind of muscle, if you are active and busy, meaning you even exercise, like let's say twice a week, or you have a job where there's physical demand, or even if you're just like a busy mom and you're constantly following your kids around, or whatever the case might be, your protein requirements go up substantially from there. So in an ideal scenario, we're looking at usually there are upper limits of 2 grams, but I would say 1 to 1.2 is kind of where I sit, a little more conservatively, per pound of body mass. And that kind of caps out around 160, 170 grams of protein per day per person. So if you are above and beyond a certain weight, you're not going to, like if you're a 300-pound individual, for example, you can't apply that same ratio because we're going to get to a point where there's excess protein being consumed, and that can become tiresome on the kidneys and other things. And also you're going to just be wasting a lot of that protein. So it'll be wasted money, wasted food, et cetera. So, up to about 160 grams in a female, I'd say about 170 grams to 180 grams in a man, adult. That is sort of like, I guess, the general average. Again, there's always going to be variation on that. It's definitely important to consider goals, to consider lifestyle, to consider activity level, and to consider current body composition. So I would normally take any individual and apply the 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And then that's where we sort of sit. And then based on any other specific concerns or goals, we would potentially up that, or in very rare cases decrease it, but very rare. Like 99% of the people that I work with are having to increase protein past that point versus decrease. It would only be due to some very specific, serious health conditions that we would ever decrease that number. And there is a lot of confusion around this. A lot of people will Google how much protein do I need, and they'll see the RDA and they'll think that that is sufficient because it sounds sufficient, but they have to remember that that's merely to prevent deficiency. It's not at all to yield optimal health outcomes. And the proof is always in the pudding. So if you consume the adequate amount of protein, that sort of more 1 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight, you feel a lot better, very quickly, I would say. I've never had anyone report anything else. They've only ever felt an improvement in their energy, in their libido, in the way they look, in the way they sleep. Sometimes it takes time, but they feel a lot more in control also of their satiety. So there's less, I guess, inkling for binge eating, for overeating, for nighttime eating. Because the thing is, if you're not getting enough protein in your day during the day, by the end of the day, when you're fatigued and you're, tapped out because you've had a lot of work or you've been busy with your family or whatever the case might be, you're going to start to look for the things that you didn't get during the day, whether that's missed calories, missed protein, missed micronutrients, and you're going to seek them out in whatever way or whatever form they exist in your home or on Uber Eats or what have you. And a lot of the times I think people confuse their craving for amino acids. This doesn't matter if they come from plants or animals as long as they're complete. But they confuse that for just general hunger. And so they might, again, start looking for that protein, unbeknownst to them, in foods that may not be great protein sources. But when you do eat enough protein, that inclination to go looking for those amino acids in other foods just doesn't happen. So an example would be someone who has issues with nighttime eating, like maybe some uncontrollable urges to eat, say after the kids go to bed, and then all of a sudden the TV goes on, the fridge opens, and they consume more calories in the 2 hours before bed than they've consumed in the entire day. And then they feel terrible about themselves. They have an awful sleep. And the next day they'll fast until dinner time because they want to reverse the damage they did the night before. And this like horrific sort of cascade or domino effect starts to come into action, where they really poultry deficient state, because oftentimes the choices we're making at nighttime, if we're not getting the foods we need during the day, aren't exactly the best choices. A lot of stress eating, junk food, nutrient void calories, empty calories, carbs, excess carbs. And so when you preload your day with enough protein at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, those people that have had those nighttime episodes easily wash their hands of that habit. And it's pretty profound. It happens really, really quickly. And I'd say it's the most powerful tool that you could utilize as an individual, is just getting enough protein. Don't worry about all the other noise, even if that's your first step, don't worry about what specific fruits and vegetables have more vitamin C or less, whatever, or even don't worry about processed food, even to start. Just eat enough protein and you'll start to see things actually fall into place, kind of without effort in many ways. And then you can start to improve all of the other things like the micronutrients and the other macronutrients around that as you, prioritize and implement protein as your sort of the center point of your diet.
Man, I can definitely second that. My weakness my entire life has always been chips. I just love eating chips. And when I started eating the way that I've kind of just been piggybacking off of the concepts I hear from my wife. And so I've been implementing that in my own life. And maybe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, I bought a bag of chips just because I wanted a snack. I was out doing a concert with a band I work for, and I was thinking I wanted a snack, and I didn't end up eating them that day. They ended up in my closet, and I opened that closet pretty much every day since the day I put that bag of chips in there, and that bag of chips has not come out. Because I'm just not hungry in the evening because I
love hearing that. I love hearing that. I hear that story so many times, and it's almost always chips, by the way.
Why are they so good?
I am the same. They're so good. I have a chip weakness too. Actually, mine used to really be popcorn. And so I'll give a little personal story here, because people love a personal story. They like to hear, what I've been through. And, I would say, I've tried every diet on for size that could potentially even exist, because I do it on purpose for the most part, because I like to know if they actually work. What's the mechanism? Can I understand the mechanism? Is it safe? Is it applicable to any clients that I have? Or is it total BS? And so I've done, a lot of different diets over the years. And I've also done a lot of diets over the years due to, poorer understanding at times of what actually is the reality of life. Like I was vegan for a very, very, very long time, many, many moons ago. And as a result of that, I had many deficiencies. And after that, I did definitely have a time where binge eating was certainly a part of my personal life. And I hid that from everybody because it was embarrassing. I didn't realize why I had it at the time. Of course, again, this is going back to a time where I thought that a plant-based diet was superior. I was wrong about that. It's okay to be wrong, know better, do better. But binge eating was definitely something that kind of came as a piggyback to that. It makes perfect sense. I was certainly not getting anywhere near enough protein on that diet, and I was doing it very well. I was, doing proper food combination, making sure I was getting complete proteins. I had protein powder supplementation. There was all sorts of things happening to ensure that I wasn't deficient, but we don't extract the same amount of protein from plant foods. They're way more energy exhausting on our through the digestive process. So, there's a lot of conversations to be had around there, but basically, long story short, popcorn became my crutch, and I could easily put away like a Costco size bag of lesser evil popcorn by myself in one night, like easily put that away, which is probably like, I don't know, 1,000 calories worth of popcorn potentially. And oh my God, like my digestive system was just in agony all the time. And, I did that for probably a good couple of years, intermittently, not every single night, but certainly I would say weekly I was doing that. And if there was a bag of popcorn in the house, there was no way it was going to make it to see the light of the next day. Like if that was in the house, it's gone that night, no matter what. But once I started to get enough protein, like you said, I would buy a bag of protein or a bag of popcorn, and I would open the drawer and it's like my brain didn't even see it anymore. It was like totally unnecessary. And then that sort of, cascaded to like, okay, so maybe one day I didn't really eat as much protein as I should have. I would have some of the popcorn, but I wouldn't need to eat the whole bag. I had regained this innate sort of self-control that didn't even require any thinking. I just was like, oh, I've had, 3 cups of popcorn, good to go, folded the bag back up, put it in the cupboard. And inevitably, I'd have to throw the popcorn away before it emptied because it would go stale. And that was a huge eye-opening moment for me. And that, just like you said with the chips, and so many others of my clients have had the exact same story. It's always with the salty snack foods where they're like, oh my God, I bought this bag of chips and it's still sitting in there and it's been weeks, or I had to throw it away because I opened it and had 3 chips and then like they went stale within a few days. So I threw them away. It just tells you everything you need to know. And so I think there is a real element to this whole conversation that is simply just about application and then listening to your body. First of all, giving yourself enough time for it to actually take effect, be consistent. Don't derail yourself, allow for yourself to get into a state where your body actually feels safe and satiated for the first time, probably in a really long time, if ever, arguably for a lot of people. And then see how all the things just start to slowly shift around you. I really wish that we could get more people onboarded with the slow and steady wins the race concept versus like the quick fix, silver bullet, magic potion that everyone is always looking for, the 30-day fix, the 28-day makeover, like all of these things, these 7-day juice cleanses, like never in a million years are those things going to work for you, ever. It just doesn't happen like that. And if it does, people get bummed because they like gain weight again after they stop their 30-day fix or whatever it is. And of course, you will gain weight after something like that. You're going to just jump into your old patterning. You haven't actually, if anything, you've probably created more deficiency because you've been in a calorie restrictive state where you're not having any protein at all, like on a juice cleanse. So you're going to actually go hard off the rails when you kind of come out of one of those sort of situations. And so my approach with people is very, very slow and steady. We want to signal to the body that there is a state of abundance, that you're getting more than you need, that there is no reason for the body to feel nervous or scared or deprived or restricted. We want to build metabolism. We want to rev up that engine. We want to give the body more than it needs across the board, micro and macronutrients considered, even calorically in some cases. We need to sort of refeed after years of deprivation for a lot of people, especially women with long histories of disordered eating. Like I think probably any woman and many men too can absolutely understand what I say when I say that. It's a real problem, and really signal to the body that it has everything it needs to do whatever it needs to do properly. And so that gives your immune system the chance to actually perform the way that it is designed to perform. It signals to the body that, if you want to have a baby, you've got everything you need to make that baby. If you want to run a marathon, you've got everything you need to run that marathon and recover. To have a healthy mental state, to digest your food properly, to have a healthy bowel movement, to sleep well, to have enough energy to run around with your kids or perform at your job or do whatever it is you need. By restricting or under eating any sort of micro or macronutrient, we're always going to come up short on being able to hit those to do those things or hit those goals or meet that requirement.
Right. So on the idea of coming up short, let's hit two spots. One that I don't have experience with and one that I do have experience with. You mentioned veganism. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that? And then the one that I've had experience with is intermittent fasting. What are your mm-hmm. thoughts on that?
Okay. So two very big questions that could probably have multiple episodes each. But okay, veganism. So again, as someone who was vegan for close to a decade, I have plenty of experience with that. I definitely do not think that it is a sustainable diet, especially for women, but also for men, for humans in general. We are not herbivores, full stop. And yes, we can play God as much as we like and create protein supplements and vitamin B12 supplements and iron supplements and vitamin A supplements and choline supplements and all of these nutrients that are borderline impossible to get from plants, impossible in some cases to get from plants. And we can create this false reality that we can long-term sustain ourselves on a plant-based diet. And many people actually do that. I wouldn't say many, it's a very small portion of the population that actually maintain a vegan diet long-term. I think more than 80% of people that go vegan are not vegan within 2 years of going vegan. That's the stat. So that tells us a lot about the application of that diet and its success rate. I definitely think that it is an understandable thing to do from an emotional perspective. I think that the messaging right now is, be kind, our environment is suffering. What can we do to fight climate crisis, global warming, soil health, there's all of this conversation that's happening around why it's a good idea to not eat animal foods. And I think for the vast majority of people who are already they have no bandwidth left for information. They have no bandwidth left for going down the rabbit hole and understanding things to a deeper level, because it's a very stressful time to be alive. We are spread really thin. We've been through a pandemic. We have outrageous political and environmental issues going on around the world. Our family units, our relationships, our finances, our children, our everything is at a very high level stress right now. And so I think anything that feels like it's going to make us feel like we're doing the right thing is appealing at this moment in time. And so a lot of people are going to choose veganism right now because it makes them feel good about themselves, even if temporarily they think that they're doing the thing that is morally correct. And I think that that is for the vast majority of people that go vegan, the reason why they go vegan is they think that is they're doing something that's going to improve the world. And I think that's a beautiful reason to do something. I really do. I certainly can relate to that. And I see in, clients that come to me who have been vegan for a long time, that is the reason why they did that. But it isn't a good enough reason to throw your own personal health away. There are ways to eat in a way that is, creating less harm, that is contributing to a more regenerative, sustainable way that allows for human nutrition to be considered. Ideal human nutrition is omnivorous. It includes both plant and animal foods for very good reasons. Evolutionarily, that is how we have evolved. That's how we've thrived as a species. It's what we need. And I think it's really important to do whatever you got to do. If veganism is the chapter that you're in and you're the book of your life right now, then that's fine. Sometimes it's a really good place to evolve from. You learn a lot about yourself and what you can and cannot withstand. And you also have the opportunity to then dig a little deeper, peel back another layer of the onion, learn a little bit more. Factory farming is terrible. I don't want anything to do with that. But there's another way. There's a regenerative ag way where you can go to the farm where your animals are raised and actually get to know the people that raise them and be a part of their really comfortable lives and see how they're giving back to the ecosystem and, financially supporting a really good small group of people that are working really hard and feeding a community locally so that we're not using fossil fuels for transportation of animal meats from Australia to Canada or Brazil to Canada. We're, utilizing local systems and improving the soil health of the farms where those animals are pastured. And we're not using our dollars to support a conventional system that is degrading our environment and is polluting our waters and is contributing to harmful, cruel practices. There isn't an all one size fits all approach. And so you can kind of have your cake and eat it too, if you will. I'm not a lover of that phrase, but it sort of makes sense to the average person, so I'll use it. You can have a diet that is omnivorous and care about the environment and care about the well-being of animals. And in fact, actually make a bigger difference truly by allowing yourself to eat a really good human diet while voting with your dollar. And I know I would argue that goes even further, because when you nourish yourself and you prioritize your health and well-being and you live your life in a way that is enabling you to feel really good all of the time, you only want that for the people around you. You're much more capable and able to step forward in your community, lend yourself to whatever cause may be relevant at the time, to support your friends and family, to elevate other people, to help other people feel amazing. You can't do that when you're operating from a place of utter exhaustion, you're anemic, your hormones are dysregulated, you're hungry, you're pretending like your diet works for you, you're constantly craving things that you are restricting. That's sort of the flip side of this is I think that veganism and many other diets are a really good hiding place for eating disorders. No one is questioning the young girl at the family dinner who has a tiny salad on her plate and a couple of sticks of carrots because she's vegan. They're going to let it slide. But I think a lot of the times it is just simply a mask for an eating disorder, and it's socially acceptable. And I think that is really, really damaging and really so dangerous. And so I have a lot of bones to pick with the vegan movement. I was a part of it for a long time. Like I said, I don't at all endorse it for many different reasons. I would never try to derail someone. Obviously, people listening to this conversation, this might sound like a potential derailment, but I mean, in one-on-one work, I would never say to someone, don't be vegan. I'm going to help you as much as I can to better understand your relationship with food so that you can kind of come to these realizations on your own. But I certainly don't think that it is a acceptable, sustainable choice for humans or most pets, since that's unfortunately where a lot of people go after they're vegan themselves. They put their dogs or cats on a vegan diet, which is just mind-boggling to me. So in a nutshell, I definitely am not a supporter of a plant-based, an exclusively plant-based diet.
Right. And then the other facet was intermittent fasting.
Right.
Excuse me.
Right. So also have, done a lot of intermittent fasting and long fasting. And I definitely think fasting is an interesting topic because I think for some people it can be really fantastic and it can really help to reset some maybe long-standing issues. It can be used as a tool if done properly. It can be really fantastic when we're healing, if we're sick. There are a lot of applications for fasting that humans have utilized for 10,000 years, arguably much longer than that, but documented for about 10,000 years. It's a practice that has been used in, Western and Eastern medicine, in many different religions over time. It's really wonderful. And there's a lot of research to validate some of its fantastic effects. I also think, though, just like with veganism, it can be a way of hiding an eating disorder. It's a really easy way to say, I'm going to do a 7-day fast just for the sake of not consuming calories for 7 days to have a quick weight loss. I definitely think that is a reason why some people choose to do long fasts or even intermittent fasts. I do think that women have to be more careful with fasting. Our hormones are really delicate. They get derailed very easily. In fact, it's not a super robust system. We're especially in like childbearing years, very susceptible to any changes in our hormones, and those can present in, short-term issues or can turn into really long-term difficult issues to actually unravel and bring back to sort of homeostasis. I've seen that a lot in my one-on-one practice, a lot of fasting that results in really slowed metabolism, really high body fat percentages in females that aren't really big. They just are kind of low muscle, higher body fat, a lot of visceral fat, but occupying sort of smaller quote unquote bodies. And that's just because they haven't been fueled properly. Their resting metabolic rate is is shunted and sort of stuck. It can result in a lot of thyroid dysregulation, which is very challenging to bring back, infertility. But it also can be used, like I said, for a lot of good. And if it's done properly and it's done correctly, then it can yield some really wonderful, incredible results as well. So I think it's just something that needs to be handled carefully. And I also think we need to see more research done in female people. So a lot of the research that's done to date has been in males, and women are not little men. We're really different. And we need to be treated accordingly because, your hormones look very different to my hormones, and your metabolism operates in relation to those hormones, and so does mine. Our bone health is factored into that, our mental health, our fertility, all of those things. And so, applying the science to a group of men that have done intermittent fasting, but applying that to females is, I think, a recipe for disaster. And I think that needs to be considered. And it's slowly happening, or we're seeing more and more research done in female populations. But I think it definitely needs to be handled carefully, the fasting piece.
Yeah, I've had, I would say, both good and bad experiences on it. I started doing it because I heard about it and I thought it was interesting. So I started skipping breakfast, and I felt great for a while. And it was really, really good. I was very mentally alert while I was fasting. I had lots of energy, which is not what I anticipated while I was fasting. But because I'm a knucklehead, and I just do everything to extremes, I was like, well, if I cut out one meal and it's good, obviously cutting out 2 meals will be good, will be even more good, right?
Right.
And so I went down to just 1 meal a day. And even that for, maybe a week was okay. And then I was out hunting with a friend of mine, and he looked at me, he's like, dude, you look pale and sickly. And I was like,
oh no,
I feel pale and sickly.
Oh. Yeah.
So I started eating food again, and now I feel better.
Yeah, really? That's shocking.
Who would have known, right?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to the extreme thing. I definitely used to be like that myself. I've done a lot of work in the last couple of years. The pandemic actually was really beneficial to me in that regard, because I was able to sort of take more time to simply just like sit and wait a second, like, let me forget about all the stuff that I read about all the time. How do I actually feel my best? Like, forget the research. Let's just like really get in touch with our own bodies. And maybe it takes a little while and some trial and error and trying things on for size and avoiding, like, unfollowing all the influencers and researchers and people that we take information from, and allowing us to just like, what works best for us, not you or you or you, but what works best for us. And so I've done a lot of work in the last couple of years, sort of really listening to my own body and finding out what actually is the best for me. Where is my weight the steadiest? That's one gauge I like to use with, especially women. We're told that our weight can fluctuate up to 10 pounds a day. I'm sorry, but that is just utter bullshit. That is, you are sick. If your weight is fluctuating 10 pounds a day up and down, you're not doing well. That's not normal. Your weight should be able to be very consistent. Yes, when we're in flow, literally, when we're cycling and we're having a period, there is a little bit more water retention. It shouldn't be dramatic. Again, that's a sign of, I would say, some sort of dysregulation hormonally. Yes, you could not have a bowel movement for a day, and that could account for a couple of pounds, I suppose. But like, really and truly, like a person's weight should be able to maintain within a pound or so day to day. And so, having someone who's fasting, for example, and they're, on an OMAD sort of situation, like you mentioned, OMAD, 1 meal a day. That was like a real big thing for a while. I'm sure there's lots of people still hanging on to that one for dear life. You're going to have some serious weight fluctuations because you're not going to be able to do 1 meal a day for the rest of your life. Eventually, your body is going to scream at you for adequate calories, adequate protein. It's almost impossible to get what you need on 1 meal a day. You literally have to be sitting down to a meal that is about 2,000 to 3,000 calories a day to get enough. And most people would throw up if they ate a meal that large. It's just that's a lot of food for one serving. And really, if you're getting a lot less than that day after day, then you are starving yourself slowly or quickly, depending on how restrictive you actually are being. And so inevitably, you'll get to the point where you binge. You'll get to the point where you're like, I am so hungry, I'm just going to eat literally everything in sight. And your hunger hormones like leptin and ghrelin are totally dysregulated. That off switch for, I'm full never gets turned on. And because your leptin is so low, it's so suppressed that you will feel hungry indefinitely. And ultimately, then that just sends you on like a crazy blood sugar roller coaster, a crazy hormone roller coaster. You can't sleep properly because your blood sugar is so high. You're less insulin sensitive. Like there's just this like cascade of utter chaos that happens metabolically in people like that. And again, especially women. And so I think it's always better to just do something that is sustainable, truly, day in and day out. And then, if you like once a year want to fast for 2 days because it's just like it feels like the right thing to do. Maybe you've just been sick and you don't have a lot of appetite. That's like a nice way of listening to the body. Like, I'm really sick right now. I don't have an appetite. Great. Don't eat, fast, because your body's telling you to do that. But day to day, when like we're all high stress, we're busy, that's not what we need. We need actually more, not less. We just need more of the right foods, more of the nutrient dense whole foods that actually fuel us, that give us what we need. And the reason you felt so clear-headed and sharp, because that's such an addictive thing to feel. Trust me, like that's the one thing that I really did love about fasting and even keto diets, where because you're like in a fasting mimic state, so you're producing the same hormones, is your adrenaline and cortisol are through the roof. Basically, it's a survival mechanism. You don't have enough, so your body is jacked up on the right kind of hormones to keep you at a heightened state because you need to be alert. You're not getting what you need. And so if you go back to our sort of like ancestral past, the only way you're going to have enough energy to find food is if your cortisol and adrenaline go through the roof, so that you are operating off of basically like a non-food energy source. And you can go and find the food you need. It's to keep you clear and sharp, because otherwise if we didn't have those hormones to rely on, you'd be fatigued, pale, tired, nauseous, and feeling terrible. And then you just starve to death because you wouldn't find the food you needed. That's evolutionarily how it would have been. Now we have food around us all the time, so we don't necessarily need that cortisol and adrenaline to get us to the next meal, because all we know we just need to open the fridge or go to the store or what have you. But that clarity that we get from those stress hormones is very addictive. And for a lot of people, they're like, well, I feel amazing. Like, well, yeah, you feel amazing, but you're basically on like an endogenous drug. Your body is hyping you up because it doesn't have what it needs to properly fuel you. You're not getting energy. So your body is giving you this false sense of being energized so that you can get it the fuel it actually needs. Because eventually you run out of, you deplete cortisol, you stop having that same response. And then you hit that wall and you feel terrible. And by that time, there's been damage done. And the more you sort of recreate that scenario time and time and time again, your body is going to be like less responsive each and every time. So it's not fasting is, like I said, again, just a reminder, it is an amazing tool that can be used if it's used properly. And it can also be like highly destructive, a really good masquerade for eating disorder, and is often used incorrectly or improperly.
Right. There's a couple other things I wanted to hit, but I do want to be respectful of your time. So it would be as long-winded or as short-winded as you happen to need to be. We talked pretty much exclusively about food today, but I think you would probably agree that the health and well-being of your body and your mental state and all of that stuff is multifaceted beyond food.
Absolutely.
It is sleep patterns. It is how much time you spend in the sun. It is so many other things. So what are some of the other things that people can be thinking about if they want to be taking care of their bodies and their minds?
Thank you for saying that, because actually I would argue that there are some non-food related things that are even more important than nutrition. I always talk about nutrition predominantly only because it's what most people are more comfortable in discussing. They understand the relation between something going into our mouth impacting the way that we actually function. However, it isn't just that. And in fact, some of the other things, the lifestyle driven things that we do, can enable our nutrition to be a little more lax actually in times. So for example, the sun. So getting enough time in the sun is important for a myriad of reasons. But our mitochondria actually are energized by the sun. Like with all living things on planet Earth, we need the sun to survive. Humans have been sort of known as children of the sun since cave paintings were established. Like it's a very substantial part of our history. You can look at even your pets, like your cats and dogs, that always find a little beam of light somewhere and bask in it. Lizards, all of those things, they do that. And humans love to do that too. It's just that we're so disconnected with sort of the self-regulation mechanisms of our body that sometimes we don't see the sun all year. And then we go on a 1-week vacation to Cuba and lay out in the sun for a week straight and burn ourselves to a crisp. And that is absolutely not ideal in any shape or form. And what would be better is if we enabled time outside and sun exposure to happen in smaller increments every single day, even in the winter. And that's for, again, it's has multiple beneficial aspects related to it. So of course, vitamin D production is essential through the sun. You can supplement vitamin D, of course, it's not going to be the same, but we make vitamin D via the sun and cholesterol in our skin. That's how we actually synthesize vitamin D. And here in Canada, we can really only do that for a few months out of the year. So the sun has to be at the right, we need to have a high enough UV index. So it depends on our latitude and things of that nature. But basically from, sort of like mid-June to September is really the only chance we have for really easy vitamin D production. So during those warmer months in the winter, it's really important to be getting outside at various points in the day. Vitamin D production can only happen more midday when we have UV light present. It needs UV light to be synthesized in the body. But that's not the only light that matters that we get from the sun. So we also get red and infrared light from the sun. That happens at sunrise and sunset. And red and infrared light are incredibly healing and restorative. We have a lot of really incredible science to back that up. We know that it is infrared light specifically is very anti-inflammatory. It's really good for healing and recovery. So if you've had a surgery, for example, there are even some hospitals in the US that are implementing red light therapy post-surgery because it's so incredibly effective in the speed of recovery of especially like skin cells. But it also signals melatonin production and also melatonin release. So, if you are someone who isn't sleeping really well, for you to wake up in the morning and get a dose of red light, like red and infrared light from sunrise, that early morning light, that is actually going to signal melatonin production or release. And so that by the time you go to bed, you actually are getting the right release of melatonin in order to get you to sleep on time and keep you to sleep. Unfortunately, our light environment is very disrupted these days by the onslaught of blue light. Like we're bathing in blue light all day. There's blue light from the sun during the day, which is fine. That would be normal. Had we continued living in an outdoor environment, that would have been enough blue light to signal lots of really important things in the body. Blue light's necessary for lots of different systems and mechanisms. But we have blue light basically from the moment we open our eyes to the moment we close our eyes. A lot of us pick up our phone first thing in the morning, and the last thing we see before we close our eyes to go to sleep is our phone. Most people aren't wearing proper blue light blocking glasses. And then all through the day, we're staring at our screens like right now. And so that blue light actually blocks melatonin release and production. So if you are a creature of the blue light, then you are going to not have the adequate melatonin production and release to, properly welcome a really deep restorative sleep. And so again, like that's going to be another big factor for a lot of people, is, getting adequate sleep. Sleep equals proper metabolism of sugars and carbohydrates. It signals a more favorable blood sugar response and insulin response. People that don't get great sleep are basically operating as like pre-diabetics and diabetics in some cases. That's how high we see blood sugar and insulin in folks who have even one night of really bad sleep. That's going to increase body fat gain and decrease the ability to lose body fat. It also obviously impacts all of our other hormones because they all integrate together. They all work off of each other. So if you're never going to just have one hormone that's out of whack. The whole system is going to be, balancing and counterbalancing. So that would be a sort of a big talking point. And then, there's a whole spectrum of light. There's ultraviolet light, UVA and UVB, blue light. There's red and infrared. There's all sorts of other important things to consider when we're talking about light and light exposure. But, the easiest way to do it without really getting caught up in all of the specific nerdy, the nerdumness of what I'm talking about is, just like getting out in the morning for 20 minutes when you wake up. Don't look at your phone. Just go outside. Have a moment with yourself, have your coffee or your tea outside, walk your dog. If you have a dog, it's a great time. Just go out, do that dog a favor too, and let that dog get some natural light in the morning. Instead of like smoke break, I guess. I don't think that many people are smoking anymore, but it was totally socially acceptable to take multiple smoke breaks throughout the day. Take a sun break. You don't need to go outside in a bathing suit and tan. You just need to go outside and expose some part of your body, your eyes to, whatever light spectrums are available to you throughout the day. You get outside again sort of towards sunset if possible. Obviously, work situations and life situations don't always enable this to happen. But if you can prioritize this even a few days a week, you're laughing. I think the last time I looked at a statistic, it was that 90% of our day is inside under artificial light. 90% of our life, rather. Sorry, not our day. 90% of our life is inside under artificial light without any access to the natural world. And for some people, that is for sure 100% of their day. There's lots of people that never leave their house. And we are not creatures of an indoor life. We were not cave dwellers. We were not living at the bottom of the ocean where, even those creatures are getting some level of, filtered UV light through the water or what have you. We are literally creatures that existed and evolved in sunlight, in moonlight. And we know that this is really important for our biology, for our mitochondrial function, for our overall health and well-being. And so, it's not just nutrition. It's not just exercise. It's not just sleep. It is your relationship to the outside world, to nature, getting sunlight, getting fresh air. And, it doesn't have to be perfect. We don't have to do all the things all the time at 100%. No one is capable of that in our modern world. It's about integrating what we know to be an important element of our evolution and our human biology and physiology, and integrating that and marrying that into our modern life and creating some level of balance so that we can continue to be healthy and energized and creative and inspired beings. And it's all important. And, there's lots more information than what I possibly discussed today. It's just like the very tip of the iceberg, what we chatted about today. But it's all relevant and it's all important.
I think that's so interesting to hear a scientific explanation of sunrise and sunset, because I think any human who has watched either a sunrise or a sunset knows that there is something healing about it. I think we all collectively understand that, but it's so fascinating to me to hear scientifically why that might be the case, because it's something that, like, I feel like it's a truth that we all kind of carry with us. We know that it's good for us to see those sorts of things, but to hear an actual scientific explanation that it creates a specific chemical reaction within our bodies that benefits our health makes so much sense.
Yeah. Yep, it does. And you're right. I think everybody does have that sort of innate knowing. Who doesn't love looking? Find me a human being on this planet that has seen a sunrise or a sunset and hasn't been absolutely blown away. Like, it is absolute magic. It's just so gorgeous. It's so breathtaking. It's so restorative. It's humbling. So there's an emotional aspect, a spiritual aspect. There is a physical aspect, as we know from the like you said, the chemical reaction that happens to the infrared and red light. It's so important to every possible, tangent of our being. It has an impact on all the, different slices of this pie of our life. And it's the two things, sunrise and sunset, that we unfortunately miss the most because either we're sleeping through it, or we're working through it, or we're just, I guess, distracted by our lives, by our busyness, by our phones, by our kids, by whatever the case may be. And I think that, again, like, even if you can't change your diet, even if you're at a point in your life where the idea of changing anything about what you eat feels impossible, that is okay. But just do one thing. Just do one thing somewhere along this spectrum that can help you at some level. So if that just means being there for sunset every night and not changing anything else that you do in your life, you just won. You just hit a huge milestone. You just won. And from there, you're probably going to find yourself more likely to then go, all right, that feels really good. I'm going to not sleep with my phone in my bedroom. That'll be my number 2. And then maybe number 3 is like, I'm not going to eat French fries anymore because I'm doing these things one by one that just make me feel like a better person. And so you don't have to do it all at once. It's not all or nothing. I don't think that's the right approach for 99.99% of the people on planet Earth. There's a few crazy people out there that can somehow manage to just like flip a switch and their whole lives are like perfectly structured and routined and amazing. But for the most of us, we need to take baby steps. And so take whatever baby step that you need to feel incrementally better. And it doesn't have to be related to food yet if you don't want it to be. It can be related to sunlight. It can be related to movement. It can just be a walk around the block every morning. It can be sleep related or related to your social media consumption. It can be related to whether you watch the news or not. It can be related to all sorts of different things. But just baby steps here and there. And eventually it turns into a much more balanced life if you keep that rhythm going.
Yeah, I think that's like a key takeaway. We can't do it all at once, and no one's ever going to be able to sustain that. And the good news is that there are so many ways you can, in a small way, improve your life.
Definitely.
I mean, something as simple as going outside for the sunset every night. Practice that until you got it, and then pick up the next thing and just do them one at a time. We can get to a better place. Cait, I don't want to keep you too long, so I want to let you go. But before you go, please let people know where they can find you online, and especially if they want one-on-one consultation with you, where can they find that?
Yeah, for sure. So you can definitely find me on social media. It's just Cait Mizzi, CaitMizzi. That's on Facebook, Instagram. CaitMizzi.ca is my website. You can book appointments accordingly there. I do offer a free 15-minute meet and greet visit. It's by phone, open to anyone in any country in the world. I can work across borders. So, wherever you're listening to this from, you're welcome to book a meet and greet. We can just chat, see if we're a good fit. And then I also have a very affordable Patreon membership that people can subscribe to if they just kind of want to get a little bit more, of a feel of like some of the stuff that I offer through one-on-one visits. You're going to get some content that's not available anywhere else, a lot of applicable functional things, handouts, lots of recipes, meal plans, at-home testing you can do to sort of assess certain things. So that's available on Patreon/Cait Mizzi. Like I said, very affordable. There's 2 membership levels there. And for now, that is that. I am working on a big course that will be rolling out sometime within the next sort of few months. And that is going to be a course that is specifically focused on healing your relationship with food, kind of the idea of sort of reverse dieting, getting rid of the hyper focus on calorie restriction or calorie counting, and the idea that weight loss is everything. And it's going to help to really educate you and help teach you and walk you through building back of your metabolism and really restoration of all of your systems. It's pretty much what I seem to be doing with every patient one-on-one. So I figure I better package that into a really, really, really good detailed online course that people can take where they get way more bang for their buck. It's distilled down. There'll be handouts and lots of live lessons and integrations and things like that. So you can keep an eye open for that course coming down the pipeline.
Amazing. Well, Cait, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Canadian Story. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at TheCAD That's the CAD Story. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Let's work together to remind Canadians how great their country is.